How's everyone doing on this fine Wednesday? Another big show ahead. We're not even at free agency yet. Free agency's less than a week away, but we still got a bunch to talk about. Allen Robinson may actually be coming back. Steelers front office red flagged operationally. That one's interesting. And then finally, we'll go over some more free agent targets because we got a tweet from a Steelers insider talking about kind of where he thinks the Steelers are going to be leaning towards in free agency. Like, what position are they going to be focused on free agency versus focusing on in the draft? And we'll go over some predictions or just some targets that the Steelers will be looking at each of those positions. But first, let's start with this Allen Robinson news because this one came as a complete shock. Ari Meroff, who is NFL insider for 33rd Team, I didn't know he actually covered the NFL. If you guys see him on Twitter, I always thought he was just like a burner account and would repost news that actual NFL insiders drop. But apparently he actually covers the NFL. So good for him. Learn something new every day. But he wrote in an article for the 33rd Team, Allen Robinson is a potential cut candidate due to his cap number exceeding $10 million. But the Steelers would prefer to retain him at a reduced salary. Team officials met with Robinson's representation in Indianapolis. So did some research. One, I thought Allen Robinson was a foregone conclusion to be gone from this team. But I looked into it because we were going to get some cap savings from him. But I looked into it, and it's a significant amount of cap savings. So if we cut him, it would be $10 million. And right now, he's sitting at an $11.9 million cap hit. So we'd only have to take on $1.9 mil of dead money. His stats last year, 34 receptions, 280 yards, and 0 touchdowns. I actually thought the production was a little bit less. I thought it was going to be more like, he had like 190 yards and, 28 receptions, 0 touchdowns. So 280, 34, still not good. Still not what you signed Allen Robinson up for. And if you look at his last 3 seasons, he's just been on this downward trend. Like, he was a franchise receiver with the Jaguars and even for a minute with the Bears. But over the last 3, he has not been the same. And that's what happens when you age in the NFL, naturally. And this has been on 3 different teams. His last season in Chicago, did a stint out in LA, and then last year with the Steelers, he's only averaged 340 yards a season over the last 3. Now, the thing that's going in his favor right now for sticking around with the team, not only this report, but the fact that he didn't get cut with the first wave of the Steeler cuts. Like, you know how we released Mason Cole, Presley Harvin, and what name am I missing? Mason Cole, Presley Harvin. Oh my God, there was one other guy, and I completely forget. There was 3 that we released. Chooks. How could I forget that one? That's the one that we got the most cap savings on. But yeah, that's in his favor because why would we keep him around even up to this point? It seems on paper, right? It's an easy cut to make. But the fact that he wasn't cut with the first wave goes to show that, I think this report is kind of accurate. I think the Steelers do like him for whatever reason. And it even was exemplified at the combine interviews when Omar was talking about him. He seems to like him a lot.
We had a great experience with him this year. He came in, we made the trade. It was fun. I mean, you guys saw the impact he had on the run game, and it's been a great experience with him so far.
Omar clearly smiled when he spoke about Robinson's impact in the run game, which is cool, but when you're a receiver, that shouldn't be the first thing that you're known for. And for Allen Robinson's career, that is not the first thing that he's known for. But at this point, if that's what like the silver lining is for keeping him on the team, I don't know, man. I don't know. Is it worth it? Now, a bunch of you out there will probably bring up Hines Ward, like, oh, he's known for his blocking. But no, he's a Hall of Fame receiver before we talk about his blocking. Although the blocking stuff does go hand in hand with Hines Ward. I will admit that, but dude is like a Hall of Fame receiver, multi-time Pro Bowler, Super Bowl MVP, multiple Super Bowl champion. Like Hines Ward is like an elite receiver, Hall of Fame receiver before we talk about the blocking. The blocking just went with it. And that's what I think made Hines Ward stand out amongst his peers back in the day and just amongst any receiver throughout NFL history. Dude would light people up. Like, dude would be on, remember back when ESPN did Jacked Up? Hines Ward would be on Jacked Up as a receiver blocking a linebacker or a safety. Like, no joke. But if we're talking about Allen Robinson and, you know, the first thing we bring up is his blocking, I don't know if that's a good thing when you're a receiver. But I will say, despite the stats not being there, I still appreciate what Robinson brings to the table with the blocking and also the professionalism, because that's something you apparently can't take for granted these days with what Diontae Johnson and George Pickens were doing out there last year at times. So end of the day, like, what type of discount are we talking here? If we're going to keep Robinson, how are we restructuring this thing? Because I can't see it being worthwhile if that cap hit is split in half. If we have to deal with like a $5 or $6 million cap hit, I still don't think it's worth it. 34 receptions, 280 yards. You could find that from a lot of receivers. Now, what Robinson does bring to the table is that professionalism, is that veteran presence, is that mentorship. Are you paying $5 or $6 million for that? And the blocking? I don't know, man. I think his cap hit would have to be around $2 or $3 million for it to make sense, in my mind, at least. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Now let's move on to the Steelers front office. This one just came out of left field. This was on the Colin Cowherd podcast. Another podcast host, John Middlecoff, joined Cowherd, and they were talking about the Steelers. They were talking about Russell Wilson, quarterbacks, this and that. And he just randomly dropped that the Steelers front office is red flagged operationally from other GMs and front offices around the league. Have a gander at this one.
I do think this transition and their new front office, I don't think they're quite viewed like the same powerhouse. Like the Ravens transition from Ozzie, who works more than any retired human you'll ever see. I thought he retired 3 years ago. You see him at the combine sitting right there. The Ravens didn't skip a beat, right? DaCosta right there. I think the Steelers, they got a lot going on, right? When it comes to the transition in front office, which is natural. Most teams don't just go smooth GM to GM or coach to coach. And I just think they're an organization to kind of keep an eye on. I wonder if it's quite as how long can you keep this up? Let's face it, 50 years. Well, they've been pretty consistent. Like it's bound to, maybe they'll go through a little downturn right now. But a lot of people in the NFL kind of have them a little red flagged operationally, I would say. Not necessarily Tomlin, just the new GM, just the new thoughts from the front office. He's more of an analytical guy. Had come over originally, I think, from the contract stuff. Kevin Colbert, more of an old school Rooney type scout. It's just something to peek at as we move on toward.
My first reaction to this was just, huh? I feel like this dude is just talking out his ass here. What is he talking about with red flags? Is it red flags like in relationships when people bring up red flags when you're dating? You know what I mean? Like, oh, these guys have some deficiencies. Khan is incompetent. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's not a GM. Just, like in relationships, you'll say like he or she has a red flag, meaning they wouldn't be a good boyfriend or girlfriend or a good spouse or whatever. So is that what they're talking about? Like the front office just flat out isn't good, or Khan doesn't know what he's doing out there and he doesn't make a good GM? I don't think he is referring to that type of red flag. He can't, right? He can't, because he must not be witnessing what Omar Khan's been doing over the past year or so. Because what would you look at from Omar Khan and say, yeah, that was an amateur hour move? What bad decision has he made? I can't come up with anything. I can't name anything. Great first draft for Omar Khan last year with Broderick Jones, JPJ, Keanu Benton, Darnell Washington, trading back to get Darnell Washington and picking up picks in the process. Although there could be an argument made for drafting one of those athletic inside linebackers in the third round. But still, at the time, that was a steal, right? Getting Darnell Washington. But we also got Nick Herbig in the fourth, Spencer Anderson late in the draft. Am I missing any draft picks from last year? Can't remember completely. But yeah, I think anyone that looks at last year's draft would say home run by Omar Khan. And then all the free agency signings were great. Quan Alexander, Cole Holcomb, Landon Roberts. Even the ones that didn't necessarily hit all the way, and a Patrick Peterson. We got him on decent deals. A Keanu Neal, just a little 1-year deal, right? Revamped the O-line in a couple of these free agencies, over the last couple of years. Now, not all of that's on Omar Khan. Kevin Colbert made some moves before he left, but picking up an Isaac Seumalo, who was our best offensive lineman last year. All these dudes, again, even if they didn't hit to the extent that we're talking about, like a Patrick Peterson or a Keanu Neal because he got banged up, or a Quan Alexander because he got banged up too. These are all good moves because you're setting your franchise up for the best success building the roster. Injuries happen. Some up and down play can happen, but he also got him to the point where we're not leveraging our future. We could cut Patrick Peterson right now and get cap savings. I think it was worth the chance given that we lost to Cam Sutton last year. Maybe you could say letting go of Kevin Dotson was the worst move this front office has made over the last year or so with Omar Khan. Maybe. It's a questionable move in hindsight. At the same time, I think that was more of a Tomlin thing, a Tomlin decision, because we heard the reports how many times when Dotson was here that he was in Tomlin's doghouse. So I feel like that was more of a Tomlin thing versus Omar Khan wanting to get Kevin Dotson up out of here. He turned out to be, one of the better guards in the league last year. Hurts me. It hurts me. Hurts me to say, hurts me to witness, because I was probably the only person in Steeler Nation that had a Kevin Dotson jersey. Probably the only one. Got it way back in his rookie year. So maybe, again, Omar Khan has not done one thing wrong, I feel like, throughout his tenure as the Steelers GM. So no clue what this dude is talking about. So maybe when he's referring to red flags, he means that other teams mark next to the Steelers or Omar Khan in their phone book. They mark a red warning flag next to their number to indicate something like do not call unless you want to get fleeced, or they call him the con artist for a reason. Buyer beware. That would make more sense to me. Teams maybe put a red flag next to us in our front office because you'd have to go through Omar to make a deal. And they saw what happened to the Bears last year with us trading Chase Claypool for a second-round pick that turned into Joey Porter Jr., Defensive Rookie of the Year candidate. So to me, this comment just feels like a bunch of nonsense and just saying shit to say shit. Yeah, I feel like last year we built up a really, really solid roster. Really solid roster, which lent for still flexibility in the future. The only question is the quarterback. That's really it, man. If we had better quarterback play than what we got last year, then hell, if Kenny just stayed healthy instead of putting Mitch in, I think we're finishing at 11 wins, 12 wins. So how's that a red flag on the front office? I don't know. Yeah, we'll have to see what happens this year, but I only expect more good moves to be made where we get players that can have impact at affordable, reasonable contracts, because that's all Omar Khan has been doing up to this point. That's all he's been doing. Let's get into this free agency stuff then. I think this is a good segue. What's to come for the Steelers? Starting next week, Monday, that's when the legal tampering period starts. What is Omar Khan going to do? And Ray Fittipaldo, who is a Steelers insider for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, does a weekly or a periodical chat with fans where fans will write in, ask him questions, and he'll give his insight. So you have G-Man writing in to Ray and says, "Hey, Ray, what positions do you think the Steelers will target in free agency?" Fittipaldo says, inside linebacker and cornerback, targeting starters at those positions, a number 3 receiver, and maybe a defensive lineman. So out of these 4 positions, the one that's most surprising to me is the defensive lineman, because even though we're talking about Cam Hayward potentially losing a step, maybe having to restructure his contract to get those cap savings, get the cap hit down so we can get some cap savings. He's still really good. And then you also have Larry Ogunjobi, who we just paid a sizable contract to last offseason. You have Keanu Benton, who is a prodigy. So, we have, a solid top 3 on our defensive line right now. Maybe he's just referring to adding depth, which would make sense, and we'll get into that. But whenever I did the free agency predictions, I think it was 2 shows ago. Was it on Monday? The one position I didn't include that he has here when you're talking about starters or making a splash was inside linebacker. I thought the Steelers would be more apt to go with the draft to find a franchise inside linebacker. But with Ray saying this, inside linebacker and corners, targeting starters, I looked into the inside linebackers, man, and there are some guys out there. There are a lot of guys. So I think the market is robust and can be favorable for teams looking at inside linebackers just because there's so many. I don't think we have to overspend on any one individual guy. So let's start with cornerbacks, though. The landscape is looking like this. Two of the Steelers' potential targets have been franchise tagged by their respective teams. And these are widely considered the top 2 cornerbacks in this free agency class. Jalen Johnson and L'Jarius Sneed. Jalen Johnson with the Bears, he's, around 24, 25 years old, just made his first Pro Bowl last year. In his prime, hot commodity. And I think the franchise tag for both of these dudes is around $19 million. I don't know if the Bears are looking to tag and trade Jalen Johnson, because that's what it looks like the Chiefs are going to be doing with L'Jarius Sneed. I haven't heard word about what the Bears are doing with Jalen, but it's already out there that if a deal can't come to fruition with L'Jarius Sneed and the Chiefs, that they're willing to do a tag and trade. And there is already precedent for that with the Chiefs, because they did that with Dee Ford just 3-4 years ago, where they tagged him and traded him, I believe, to the Seahawks for a second-round pick. They're looking for a second-rounder for Sneed. That's interesting. They're willing to move off of him. A second-round pick, that's not bad to get Sneed, but then you're talking about giving him a sizable contract. That's tough. That's tough, especially because neither of these dudes are just out there on the open market. It's one thing to give either of these guys the contract that they deserve at this point in their career, the multi-year, big-time deal, but having to also give up a pick just to negotiate, that's the tough part. So I'm going to say Johnson and Sneed are officially off our radar. I don't think that's going to be something that the Steelers do. But there still are some other pretty damn good available corners out there, like a Adoree Jackson, Chidobe Awuzie. I brought him up. You got a Sean Murphy-Bunting in the slot. You got a couple guys in the slot that the Steelers can consider. Also a Kenny Moore out there. I brought up Nixon from the Packers. We could also just re-sign Shannon Sullivan on a cheap 1-year deal. Arthur Maulet, I don't know if we'd want to spin the tires there or if that's too far gone, if the beef isn't really reconcilable, because the way he left, I think there was some chirping, not necessarily back and forth, but chirping from Maulet on how the organization handled his exit, almost like Steven Nelson. We talked about that yesterday. And I think, didn't he make some comments leading up to the Steelers-Ravens game last year? I can't remember completely. But yeah, I think slot, we're not going to like overspend or anything for a guy in the slot, but an outside guy, a Dory Jackson, a Woozy, even a guy like Jeff Okudah or CJ Henderson, maybe you put out some money out there. Maybe you put up some money. And these guys, they aren't L'Jarius Sneed. They aren't Jalen Johnson, obviously, but they are security. They are your like CB2. You're not paying them to be a lockdown CB1 franchise type of guy. But in terms of an upgrade over Levi Wallace to just add some security to your cornerback room, I think these guys are definitely viable. Definitely viable. More risky with Okudah and CJ Henderson, former first-round picks who have never really lived up to the bill. But Adoree Jackson, Chidobe Awuzie, I think those are Steeler type of moves. Inside linebacker, though, man, there's a list of names. There's a big list of names here. And I broke this up into tiers. You got, like, big-name dudes still in the prime of their career that might demand a decent amount. And then you got dudes that kind of wash, but former big names. And then the last tier that I have are up-and-comers that have yet to make like a big name for themselves, but are interesting candidates who could definitely start in this league and have put up some decent production. So the first tier, 4 names: Devin White, Jerome Baker. Now that might be a stretch to put him in this tier with Devin White. He might be more deserving of the last tier, but it is what it is. Patrick Queen, he just got released by the Dolphins yesterday. Jerome Baker just got released. 27 years old, multi-seasons of 100 tackles, and a guy that has some Steeler connections, kind of. Was a teammate of Landon Roberts. This dude is considered like a straight-up dog, will be flying all out over the field and everything. So, yeah, I think he's an intriguing candidate. Was also a linebacker under the Brian Flores era in Miami. I don't know if we're still considering that a connection to the Steelers, but we all know Brian Flores was here for a year as well. Patrick Queen, that's one of the big names. He's probably going to be the most expensive inside linebacker. Would be a big-time addition for the Steelers and also a big-time subtraction for the AFC North rival, Baltimore Ravens. I don't know if he's going to be out of our price range or not. I think if we really wanted him, we could do it. But, again, as I'm going through this list of names, do we really have to spend big on a Patrick Queen when you have all these guys available? Like Jerome Baker on maybe a $7 or $8 million deal could be better value than a Patrick Queen if you're going to give Queen, 17, 18 million per year. I'd almost like the Jerome Baker, because then you could still sign a safety. You could sign one of those cornerbacks that we talked about. Like, it might make more sense for team building to go a little, let's not say cheaper, because I think all these linebackers, these inside linebackers are quality. Maybe affordable, more affordable is the right word to use. That might be the better approach for the Steelers. And then Jordan Brooks, final name in this top tier of big name guy in their prime, about to get, I think, a pretty decent payday. The next tier, though, kind of washed, big name, but can still do it and could potentially be viable for the right price. Levante David, Bobby Wagner, Eric Kendricks. I'm out on this tier. I don't want anyone from this tier at all. If I were to pick a name, Levante David would be the guy, but no, I think we got to go younger and more athletic and just more spry in the inside linebacker room at this point. I don't want to go old. No, I'm good on that. But I think this last tier goes hand in hand with that. I just don't think they have as big of a name or are as proven as that first tier of Devin White, Jerome Baker, Patrick Queen, and Jordan Brooks. You got Frankie Louvu, who is a dude that went from Jets backup, Jets role player at the inside linebacker position, to the Carolina Panthers over these last couple of years, and was the Panthers' like bona fide starter at inside linebacker. And he's been putting up some big numbers. He's a good pass rusher. I just wonder if, because this happens, a inside linebacker, just because he's on a really bad team, can get a lot of opportunities and can put up some really good numbers. It's like that putting up good numbers on a bad team type of theory. Like, are they really that good, or are they just not stat padding on purpose, but are able to get some of these numbers because the team, with how bad they are, is giving them the opportunities? I'm not 100% sure, but he's had 2 really good years with the Panthers, and I think would be worth taking a flyer. I think all of these guys in this tier are worth taking a flyer on, as long as you're not overpaying them or anything. Jose Jewell with the Denver Broncos, I think it reminds me of a Robert Spillane. Is going to be in the right position, is going to give 100% effort, not afraid to tackle, not afraid to hit the hole, make a big-time tackle on the running back. Good in zone coverage at least, but not as good in man coverage. Azeez Al-Shaair with the Tennessee Titans. He's a thumping linebacker. Thumping inside linebacker. Was a role player out with the 49ers. Got his opportunity to start with the Titans and made the most of it. Blake Cashman. Similar thing. A lot of these guys, it's kind of similar here, where they didn't have a starting role coming into the league, but then they worked their way up, finally got an opportunity, and got some production for a year or two, and now are hitting free agency. And people are just wondering, like, all right, are you going to be able to keep this up? Are you going to be able to be a bona fide guy if I pay you some money, give you a multi-year deal? Blake Cashman, same thing. Had his career year with the Houston Texans last year, was a role player for the first portion of his career, and overall, just a solid dude. Like, he grades well in coverage, grades well in run stopping, so wouldn't be a bad option either. Drew Tranquill, good coverage linebacker for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's available. Willie Gay Jr., he's more of the thumping guy that the Chiefs had at inside linebacker. And then finally, Kenneth Murray, former first-round pick. I'd say similar to like a Jeff Okudah or a C.J. Henderson. Whenever you're talking about, like, didn't live up to that first-round bill, that first-round calling. At the same time, has shown flashes and has shown production. 2 seasons of 100 tackles, and probably coming off of his career year, but it looks like the Chargers are going to be willing to move on from him. So all these names, man, like, outside of the old dudes, I'd be okay with the Steelers considering. I think Jerome Baker, if I had to make a pick right now, Jerome Baker seems like the best fit for the Steelers right now. With the Dolphins just cutting him. The Landon Roberts connections there. Plays like a Pittsburgh Steeler. Not going to have to shell out as much money for him as you would maybe for a Patrick Queen or a Jordan Brooks. I think that's the pick. If I had to make a prediction, Jerome Baker just feels like the guy. I wouldn't mind Kenneth Murray, though, taking a flyer on him with that talent. Really wouldn't mind that either. Let's get to vet receiver and defensive lineman real quick, and then we'll get up out of here. Vet receiver, here's the names that are being brought up. Tyler Boyd, that's the one that's being brought up most consistently. Noah Brown from the Texans. Darnell Mooney from the Bears. Odell Beckham, that might be a little bit too flashy for us. And then Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis was brought up on the last stream where I was talking about the free agency, and I didn't really consider it because I'm thinking more like slot receiver whenever you're talking about a wide receiver 3, right? Naturally. But with Gabe Davis, I think that can make things a little bit versatile in the receiver room, where you could put Davis on the outside, move Diontae into the slot, move Pickens into the slot, because he is a speedster. He could take the top off of defense. I didn't really consider Davis, but I kind of like it. If you could get any of these dudes for less than $10 million, probably around $7 or $8 million range, I'm not going to be complaining. Now, defensive line. Again, not something I really considered, but 2 names that I wrote down that could make sense. Fletcher Cox. He's not the Fletcher Cox of old, but if you're talking about just a depth guy to put next to Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton, and Larry Ogunjobi, could be a big-time asset. And he has been quoted saying that he wants to play with Cam Hayward. So take that for what you want. And then the last guy is Javon Kinlaw, who was a rotational piece for the Niners, former first-round pick, a lot of talent. Just didn't really work out to the degree that the 49ers would have wanted, but is still a good player and a good asset for a defensive line. Like, I'm sure the Niners would like to have him back. It's just they have so many guys to pay. Way too many guys to pay. But if they loved him that much, they wouldn't have signed Javon Hargrave last year. So he's available. I think getting him for, maybe $4 or $5 million wouldn't be a bad thing. That's what SpotRack has as his market value. But I think the most common sense move for the Steelers D-line would be just re-signing Armon Watson, maybe even re-signing Montravius Adams. You don't got to go big name or do anything crazy unless you're about to cut Larry Ogunjobi or you're about to cut Cam Hayward, which we're definitely not cutting Cam Hayward. The restructuring of the contract, that's something I think the team will do, but not cut him. Ogunjobi, that might be in play. Now, if that happens, then yeah, we do need to go out and get a bigger name. Probably even a name that I don't even have listed here. A guy that's maybe more in his prime. But I don't see that happening. I could see us just signing a depth piece on the D-line. Maybe even spin the block on Isaiah Buggs. That could happen. Now, there are some additional cuts that could be of interest at the safety position, like a Jamal Adams, Quadri Diggs. Let's talk about that tomorrow, though. Because, yeah, Jamal Adams and Quadri Diggs from the Seahawks, two guys that have made the Pro Bowl 3 times, have been released. They're out there on the open market. But we'll talk about that tomorrow because there are a lot of other safeties that are out there. And maybe we'll do some sort of ranking or some sort of priority list for additional safeties that we could bring in and pair next to Minkah Fitzpatrick. The problem with that is, though, we haven't released DeMonte Casey or Keanu Neal yet. Yeah, because Keanu Neal, I think we signed him to a 2-year deal. I think he's still on the roster right now. But, yeah, we'll talk about some of that tomorrow. But, yeah, let me know your thoughts on some of this stuff that we talked about today. Steelers front office, Allen Robinson returning on the cheap, and then also some of these potential free agent moves and free agent targets that the Steelers could be looking at. But stay chilling. Hope you guys enjoyed, and peace.